18 of these town halls. Actually, we're going to be doing more than 18. We have 18 currently scheduled. I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. But first of all, it would be helpful for me to make sure that I've had a chance to kind of get around and meet everybody. But if we could just real quick, just kind of introduce ourselves and who we're with. And Kate, I'm going to cheat and start with you.
So it's good to start in the back. I'm Kate Blunt and I'm with Juniper's RV Park.
Thank you.
I'm Claudia Reeder and I work for you at the Local Center.
Yes, you do, Claudia. Thank you.
And I'm Jim Norris and I'm with Base Camp RV Park.
All right, thanks for being here, Jim.
I'm Bob Kings, owner of the Lakeview Motel.
Beautiful, thank you.
I'm Julie Chiano, Director of the Lake County Chamber of Commerce, and I work for you too. Lakeview Welcome Center.
Julie, we all feel like we work for you, darling. I mean,
we work hard for us, and we're so grateful.
We know how this works. Like I said, on my drive in today, I stopped in Summer Lake to meet some of your other employees there at the Summer Lake store.
There you go.
So,
Such as it is, right?
but Julie, thank you so very much for helping us with all the arrangements here today, and just for what you do day in and day out to make sure all of our visitors feel welcome.
Thank you very much for being here, and really appreciate the opportunity to be one of the 18 town hall. You want to do that again, Kurt?
Yeah, it was. Hang on, let me go flash on this because it's
All right.
dark.
Why don't we move on this side of the screen?
That would help too.
You and I may have Fort Rock across our face.
Okay, try
Thanks
that
for
again.
coming.
You bet, Julie. Thanks for
There we go, much better.
All right, thanks, Kurt. Well, that was about as poised as we're going to be the rest of the day. Okay, that is the one part of today that is somewhat structured. As I mentioned, we're doing 18 of these town halls, and this is kind of the schedule. We have 18 that are scheduled during the month of May. We are very interested in adding some more. We've had some communities that have reached out to us directly, and there's some other places as we began to map some of these that were places that we wanted to go. So we're also looking at going to Roseburg, we're going to Springfield. So there are a couple others that are probably going to be added to this list as we move forward. Our goal is this. This is why we're holding these meetings around the state. We're wanting to provide our partners in the tourism industry with a bit of an overview of the industry. How are we currently doing? What is Travel Oregon's role in this? How do we work as an industry together with our local DMOs like the Lake County Chamber of Commerce, our regional DMO, which for this region is Travel Southern Oregon.
Which is Destination Marketing Organization, by the way.
And that's actually one of my slides. To say,
Forgive me, I'm done.
okay, you've been saying DMO for the last 20 minutes. What the heck is a DMO? That's actually one of the slides. No, Julie, it's why you're where you are and you're smart. Talk about our investment in statewide tourism. You know, what's happening with our investment, how we compare it to some of the other states. We went out and did a survey recently of all of our industry partners, and because we have a listserv, so it's very efficient for us to be able to reach out to folks through our listserv and survey them, ask them a few questions. I want to share those results with you. You'll see the statewide results and you'll see the Southern Oregon results. So we're able to break it down regionally as well. And I'll be interested in your feedback as to whether or not that sounds like Lake County. Does that sound like Lakeview? Or would your results be a little different than even what we're hearing here? That's good feedback. This is how we want to be sure to tweak these results. And we'll talk a little bit about then the local priorities, because fully half of this meeting is your opportunity to kind of make some notes and share out where do you want to see us go? Where do you want to see us making investments? What can we do at the state level? What would you like to see done at the regional level? You know, what are some of the things that we can be doing to benefit your business? What are some of the things you're doing that are working? What marketing are you doing that's currently working? We do not pretend to have the corner on every smart marketing idea that's ever been laid out there. So we want to make sure we're hearing from folks what's working and what's not as well. Our vision as Travel Oregon is simply this: a better life for Oregonians through strong, sustainable local economies. What you don't read there is the word travel and tourism specifically. That was very deliberate on our part, because travel and tourism is a part of a strong, sustainable local economy. We never position tourism as a panacea. It's not a replacement for other basic industries, but it's a darn important piece of it. And so we want to make sure that that message is out there, and folks understand that travel and tourism is part of building a strong, sustainable local economy. Therefore, our mission is to inspire travel that's going to drive economic development. That's job creation. What we do is about creating jobs. And so we're demand drivers at Travel Oregon. I mean, the advertising and sales and marketing that we do is about driving demand for travel to and within the state of Oregon, wanting to get Oregonians traveling here, wanting to get folks from out of state traveling here, bringing international visitors to Oregon. All of those are important components to what we do. So through innovation and partnerships, we're sharing the stories of Oregon's people and places, ensuring the preservation of Oregon's way of life in natural places. We don't want to hear that Oregon used to be a great place to go and they loved it to death. You know, we want to make sure Oregon always stays an amazing place for our folks to come and visit. So come on in.
Sorry, Mike.
No, it's quite all right. I figured we had some folks out playing hooky on a beautiful day like this. It's totally fine. So anyway, so for Travel Oregon, this is our vision and our mission, and I'm going to pause right here, and if I could, I'm not picking on you because you were late, but I did want to find out who all was here. Oh, you don't have to stand up.
Okay.
No, but I'm just curious, could you introduce yourself? Let
My
me know
name
who
is
you're with.
Pam. I'm at Theater State 8 Motel.
Beautiful. Thank you for being here, Pam. I appreciate it. Our structure is, obviously it's a state agency. Travel Oregon is a public agency. We're an agency of the state of Oregon. The governor appoints 9 members of the Oregon Tourism Commission. 5 of those, because we are funded through a statewide lodging tax, 5 of those 9 members represent the lodging industry. They must be lodging operators here in Oregon. Of the remaining 4, 3 of them represent the tourism industry at large, not including lodging. These can be restaurants and attractions and events, and you can kind of imagine who all they could be, but those are 3. And then 1 represents the public at large. Because there's one thing about Oregonians, we are a participatory population. We like to sit on boards and commissions and task forces and work groups and have a say in what's happening. And so there is one position on just about every board I'm aware of with the state of Oregon that is just for a public at large member. And we have one on our board as well. Those 9 members of the commission are my 9 bosses. They're responsible for hiring me. So I in essence work for them, and then I have the pleasure of hiring the team that comes to work at Travel Oregon. One of the folks that I did not turn around and have introduce herself as I began here today, but I will introduce now as a member of that team, is my assistant, Sarah Watson. She's joining me on my portion of these town hall trips, and Sarah, thanks so much for doing that. Sarah is going to be, as you share out, as you ask questions, as you know, any of that kind of participation today, any follow-up for us, she's capturing all that. Okay, so she'll be sitting here typing feverishly away as you and I have the opportunity to just kind of talk and share. A lot of folks wonder, and in fact, Kate and I were talking about this before we started, who is Travel Oregon and what do you do? Very fair question. And I told you a little bit about who Travel Oregon is. This is what we do. From an industry and visitor services standpoint, we hire Claudia. No, but we operate state welcome centers at the borders of Oregon. As our visitors are welcoming or entering our state, we want to make sure that they feel welcome, that they're able to get information, and that they're greeted by folks that are at least as nice as Claudia is when they do so. We also put on an annual tourism conference. We recently just held our conference in Pendleton this year, had 450 folks from across the state that were able to join us. We also currently have a small matching grant program. It's about $500,000 a biennium that we award grants of various sizes up to about $20,000 that are then matched by local organizations in terms of securing those grants. We do global marketing. This is probably the piece we're most well known for. People see the ads that are running. That's what they tend to associate with Travel Oregon. So all of that consumer marketing, what we call integrated and digital marketing, that's social media, okay? That's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're very active on primarily those 3. We do some work in Snapchat and some of the other social media platforms as well. This is also where our website, traveloregon.com, which is kind of the mothership for all things Travel Oregon, is traveloregon.com. And then the branding and creative work all happens there, as well as a lot of our research. When you hear me or any other member of the Travel Oregon team stand up and talk about what travel and tourism means to Oregon, that it's a $10.6 billion industry, that it employs 105,600 Oregonians, that's because we do a lot of independent research. What's the economic impact? Who are our visitors? Where do they come from? Where are they spending their money? What is it that's driving them here? What's their image of Oregon after they've arrived? All that is information that's important for us to capture. Domestic, or the global sales is primarily focused on our domestic and international travel trade. So this is a lot of the work that you see us doing around the world when we're working with tour operators from Germany, Australia, China, as well as Canada, but also here domestically as well. We work with the media, obviously both domestically and internationally. A lot of folks are curious what our target markets are. The Americas, Canada is our #1 international market. And then when we start looking at overseas markets, our #1 overseas market right now driving visitation to Oregon is China. China became our #1 market in 2014. Prior to that it was Japan. Japan is now #2. #3 is the UK, #4 is Germany, and #5 is Australia and New Zealand. So when you think about Australia and New Zealand, they are the longest haul visitor we have. It's about a 19-hour flight, and there's no nonstop flight. They've got to stop somewhere else in between. A lot of those other markets may have direct air service here. Not so with our friends from Oceania, Australia and New Zealand primarily. And then what's unique to Travel Oregon compared to other state tourism offices, because there are not a lot that do this, we have a destination development department as well. We're very interested in community development, business development, product development, the Scenic Bikeway program, the Bike Friendly Business program, those kinds of things come out of our destination development work. The Travel Oregon Forever program is part of making sure Oregon stays Oregon. You know, that's where we have a couple of different programs, one called the Sustainable Business Challenge, where businesses are able to say, hey, we have a sustainability certification from XYZ organization, can we be part of that? We also have a program here where consumers are able to give back to Oregon as they travel the state with modest contributions, and so far we've been able to raise nearly $100,000 that have gone to 7 different projects around the state as our folks have contributed their dollars. And then the Regional Cooperative Tourism Program is one that's actually in our statutes, and it had been written as much as 15% of the money that is received by Travel Oregon is provided back to the regions to carry out regional tourism marketing programs. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that one in just a moment though. Our current strategic plan has 4 imperatives, and this is about as deep as I'm going to go in our strategic plan because there's a great deal of detail and it's all available on our website. But what I do want you to know is that we are focused, #1, on optimizing the statewide economic impact. As I said, we see ourselves as an economic development agency. We're about generating demand for travel that's going to create jobs for Oregonians. We do this also by supporting and empowering our partners. And what we mean by that is, what can we do to help you be more successful in the marketplace? How can we provide you opportunities? Sometimes folks may wonder, should I be involved in international sales and marketing? Is my business the kind of business that might appeal to Germans or Brits or the Aussies, or, you know, that's intelligence we have, and that's intelligence we want to share with you. There are a lot of ways to get involved with international markets. Sometimes it's going to that country, but there's so many things that you can do that are short of actually going there. There are trips that are taken here where those international tour operators come to Oregon to get to know a little bit more about us. How can we bring exposure to your business as well? Championing the value of tourism is making sure we're communicating with business leaders and elected officials that tourism matters. They need to be paying attention to the industry when they're making decisions about other investments. They need to be thinking about travel and tourism because it matters to their overall economic fabric of their community, of their county, and certainly of the state. And then running an effective businesses, how are we doing? How are we doing at making sure that we're engaging with our staff? How are we ensuring that our financials are good, the books are good, our audits are clean, all the things that you would expect from a public agency, we actually call out as one of the imperatives in our plan. And if I could digress for just a moment, I'll tell you that we have consistently, since we became the semi-independent agency under the state of Oregon, consistently every year received what they call the Gold Star Award from the Chief Financial Officer of the Department of Administrative Services. It's the highest recognition they give for financial accountability. We actually had the Secretary of State's office one time look at our separation of duties, you know, who's responsible for what, balancing the checkbook, writing checks, signing checks, all those things have to be separated out so there can't be theft and fraud and whatnot. And they looked at it and they said, wow, for an agency your size, this is, you don't need to do this much. I said, then it's perfect. If it's more than you think we need to do, then it's perfect. So, who's the industry? I mean, every one of you in this room is in the industry, you know, and I heard it as you introduced yourselves. So I don't need to spend a lot of time on this slide. I did mention, and I think it's important to note, there are 105,600 folks that are currently employed in Oregon's travel and tourism industry. That means, my friends, we added 4,000 jobs last year alone. We haven't added 4,000 jobs in Oregon's travel and tourism industry since 2005. 2005 was the first full year of implementation of what was called the Oregon Tourism Investment Proposal. That was the legislation that started the 1% statewide lodging tax. So, you think about that, that bill passed in 2003, the tax started being collected in 2004, 2005 was the first year that we actually had a full year of funding with that 1% statewide lodging tax. It was the last time we added 4,000 jobs in a single year. Now, we've had good, healthy job growth, but that kind of a spike in job growth, that's what I'm referring to in particular. We put this slide in because a lot of folks have a mindset about who's in the tourism industry and who's not. You're in it, you understand that how you touch so many other businesses in your community. Here's how we work. We're working with the local businesses. Obviously, a lot of the local businesses, organizations, and individuals are working with that local DMO, the Destination Marketing Organization. In this case, it's Thule. Okay? Thule, in turn, is also working with and through the regional DMO, the Regional Destination Marketing Organization, which for your region is Travel Southern Oregon. They, in turn, are working with us. This is kind of our ecosystem in a way. This is how we do our work together. A lot of times when we do call-outs for an opportunity to work with a journalist or a tour operator, we may start with the regional DMOs who then share it with all their local DMOs who say, I know who then talk to the local DMOs and they say, I know who in my community would be interested in a British familiarization tour. You know, so we have at the end of the day, Travel Oregon has a great deal of dependence on Thule to understand the economic fabric, the tourism fabric here in Lake County. Similarly, Thule's going to have a lot of expectation of you to be communicating with her in terms of what it is you need and how you want to be involved. There's the slide I promised Thule. What the heck is a DMO? And it's just putting it up there one more time. We have 7 different tourism regions that have been identified. In fact, these have probably been in place for almost 30 years. So they predate me. And they, in essence, they're kind of self-selected in terms of how they're set up. But these are the 7 different tourism regions. I doubt there's anything there that really surprises you, but this is how, when we market the 7 regional destination marketing organizations, this is who we're talking about. And each of these regions has an organization that's on point for managing the tourism industry in their respective region. As I mentioned, here are the 7. Travel Southern Oregon is the one that's currently responsible for your work here in Southern Oregon. I've talked a little bit about 2003 and the Oregon Tourism Investment Proposal, and I think it's a good place for us to kind of go back and touch on for just a second. And it's for this reason. In 2003, Travel Oregon was funded with lottery funds, and our budget was about $3 million a year. That $3 million a year ranked us 47th in the country out of 50 states. And a lot of folks that did travel and tourism in Oregon in 2003 thought that was kind of embarrassing. To be 47th out of 50 states for all that we have to offer here, to be having that level of public investment in our tourism efforts. We were doing research on our advertising campaigns, and the independent research firm said that our advertising efforts were some of the strongest they've measured in the country, and yet we were still losing market share. And the reason we were losing market share is because we didn't have enough money to get enough share of voice, right? And so you can be running effective campaigns, but you can still lose market share for lack of resource. At the same time, Oregon also had the highest unemployment rate in the country. I don't know if you remember 2002, 2003, but our unemployment rate was running about 8.5%. It was the highest unemployment rate in the country. everybody knew that Oregon needed an economic stimulus. So House Bill 2267, which is the Oregon Tourism Investment Proposal, was passed and signed into law by Governor Kuligowski. That legislation implemented a 1% statewide lodging tax, provides 100% of those revenues to Travel Oregon. Now, I will say sadly, that's somewhat unique. And the reason I say sadly is it's not true at every level of government where local lodging taxes are collected. But at the state level, they believe that 100% of the money should go to the tourism industry. And this bill, by the way, originated with the Oregon Lodging Association. They wanted to see the investment, but they were only willing to see that investment happen if 100% of the money went to tourism promotion. So that was put in place. The other thing that was done was the protection of local lodging taxes. So in other words, whatever was being done with lodging taxes at the local level in terms of a percent of the money that was going to tourism, that was grandfathered in. They could never give less than that, whatever that percentage of local lodging taxes were. And if there were going to be future increases, if they decided to increase the local lodging tax or start a new one after July 2nd, 2003, 70%, at least 70% of that money must go to tourism. 30% of that money is unencumbered for whatever the city or county government would want to deem necessary and appropriate. So how have we done? Well, like I said, the bill passed in 2003. Tourism at that time was 85,600 jobs. Today it's 105,600 jobs, increase of 23%. Earnings are up 65%. Love seeing earnings because it starts to speak to a maturation of the industry, because a lot of folks oftentimes want to see the tourism industry as being seasonal, minimum wage, part-time employment. And while there is some of that, we know there's some of that. In fact, I make no apologies for that, because doggone it, I still think folks need a place where they can show that they can show up to work on time, properly dressed, with the right motivation and the right attitude. So, and usually that's our industry, right? The leisure and hospitality industry is a place that folks often do that. So to see earnings growing that much faster than the direct employment is also an indication of folks staying in the industry, moving up within the industry, and overall maturation in the industry. Visitor spending, up 63%. Tax revenue that's collected and paid by visitors, just the state and local taxes. By the way, at the local level, it's primarily lodging taxes. There are some rental car taxes and meals taxes in Oregon. At the state level, it is corporate income tax, personal income tax, and fuel taxes. One little fun fact for you, if anybody ever wants to talk about tourism and roads, visitors are generating 20% of our highway fund. 20% of the fuel taxes generated in the state of Oregon are coming from visitors. Okay? So when you look at the money that comes back from ODOT to the county and to the cities to help with roads, 20% of that revenue is also coming from visitors. We talked a little bit about the international piece earlier. I just want to give you an overall snapshot of that $10.6 billion. Where's it coming from? A lot of folks think that there's a whole bunch of Oregonians that are traveling in Oregon. There are a lot of, we don't want Oregonians to leave the state. We think there's plenty of vacation options for them to stay right here. They don't have to go anywhere. Roughly 24% of all visitor spending is spent by Oregonians vacationing in Oregon, which means fully 76% is spent by out-of-state and international visitors. 12% of that 76% is international, which means 1 out of every $8 at that total statewide level, 1 out of every $8 is coming from our international visitors that are traveling within the state of Oregon. Fully, when you look at this, 3/4 of the money is coming from folks that are visiting here from out of state. That's good for Oregon's economy, because those are fresh dollars coming in from outside to fuel our economy, fuel our local businesses. This most recent short session of the legislature saw the introduction of a bill called House Bill 4146. How many of you were familiar with House Bill 4146, which was a proposal to increase the statewide lodging tax? How many of you had heard about that? Any of you? 1? 2? Okay. What I want to start by sharing with you is the bill's chief sponsor, Representative Nancy Nathanson from Eugene. You read, this is an excerpt from her floor speech that she gave on the House floor the day the bill was voted on. And what popped for me is her grasp of our role as an industry. And I don't mean our role as Travel Oregon, I mean our role as an industry. Notice how she says, this bill increases resources for the Tourism Commission to invest in furthering the state's tourism industry to promote all of Oregon. Very important to Nancy. She might be a representative from Eugene, but this was for her about promoting the entire state. She also goes on to say that she knows that the investment pays off big time. She quotes our economic, or our ad accountability research, where we were able to discover that every dollar we put into our advertising campaigns generated $237 in visitor spending and $11 in tax revenue, state and local tax revenue. So she'd become a student of Travel Oregon's research and was quoting it on the floor of the House. And then she went on to say, let's recognize that there's been significant growth in out-of-state and international visitors. For example, international visitation to Oregon in 2014 increased 9% over 2013. So obviously a big fan again of bringing in those outside dollars, those things that are going to keep Oregon's economy vibrant and vital by bringing in dollars from outside. Here's what 4146 did. It increases the statewide lodging tax from 1 to 1.8% effective July 1 of this year. If you have not heard from the State Department of Revenue yet about this, you will. If you have questions about that, make sure I have your contact information and I can get it to the folks at DOR so that they can follow up with you if you have any questions about what does this mean for my forms and deposits and all that, which I know are oftentimes the questions that come up. So it increases from 1 to 1.8 effective July 1 of 2016. It then decreases that tax to 1.5% effective July of 2020. It directs 20% to the Regional Cooperative Tourism Program. Remember before I said it was as much as 15%? One of our suggestions was that they drop the as much as language and just make it a definite percentage. And the legislature concurred and they established that percentage at 20%. It also directs 10% of the state lodging tax revenue to a competitive grants program. This is different than the matching grant program that I mentioned earlier, where I said we currently have a small matching grant program of about $500,000. This is 10%. And our estimate is that this increase from 1 to 1.8% will take our current budget of about $17 million a year to about $30 to $32 million a year, which means a 10% competitive grants program is roughly $3 million a year. So you can see how much more significant that will be than the one that is currently $500,000 a biennium, which is every 2 years. So very, very significant investments in the program. Any questions at this point? I should have said at the onset, by the way, this is as conversational as we can make it, so don't hesitate to interrupt. If I've got my back turned to you and you've got a question, you've got pens at the table, you can chuck one at me and hit me in the back of the head and I'll respond to that too. But any questions so far on anything that I've shared?
You mentioned how much you spend on advertising and on your tourism budget.
Yes.
Do you then have any figures to show the return per area as to what you spend? So in other words, if you're spending $1 million or $1 billion, whatever happens to be on Oregon,
Right.
how much of that comes back to Portland or the coast versus little old rinky-dink Lakeview?
Well, I wouldn't call you a little old and rinky-dink, and I know you're doing it just to be playful, Bob. No, we don't, because the ad accountability research measures trips to Oregon. Like, how do we do it generating trips? Where the visitor has told us that it was the state's advertising campaign that actually inspired them to choose Oregon over other destinations. Where they chose to go, we don't have. Now, we have visitor profiles that do tell us where visitors are traveling, but that's not necessarily as a result of our advertising campaign. That could be as much a result of your advertising efforts and Thule's efforts and Travel Southern Oregon's efforts, as well as our efforts. Collectively, how are we influencing travel in the state of Oregon? So we know overall at the state level what that return on investment is, but in terms of exactly which region or county or community they are spending those dollars in, we don't. I will tell you this though. One of the things that we do very intentionally is make sure that our advertising campaigns represent the diversity of the state. When you look at our current advertising campaign, we have ads that were filmed in Forest Park in Portland, and we have an ad that was shot in the Elbert Desert. We have an ad that was shot in the Bandon Dunes, and we have an ad that was shot over near the Wallowas. So we're making sure that we are, crisscrossing the state, that we're showing folks the diversity of what we have to offer, so that we can drive that interest in traveling throughout the state. So, okay.
Commissioner Kennedy.
Commissioner,
Commissioner Kelston, Todd Davidson.
glad you can join us. Todd Davidson with Travel Oregon.
Glad to meet you.
Please come in, have a seat.
Sorry for the little tardiness. We had a meeting that went longer than anticipated.
I completely understand. It's in the midst of an election cycle, so, you never know who might be showing up, so I totally understand.
He's not up.
I'm not up.
No, I don't mean, I heard there was a candidate that had dropped in next door, so I wasn't sure what your meeting was, but I was hearing that you had candidates.
No, it was my mental health.
Okay. Understood. One of the other things the legislation did is
I've got another one coming in.
is it
too.
called for the creation
City
of a work
Councilman
group?
and Board Member Sharon Faulkner, Todd
How do
Davidson.
you do, Sharon? Todd Davidson with Travel Oregon.
I remember you.
Yeah, thank you.
Someplace, oh, I can't get there, but it is. Thank you, ladies.
The legislature saw an opportunity to kind of look at some various things with the travel and tourism industry here in Oregon, and so they're establishing a work group. They don't have the ability to actually influence policy, although they can recommend legislation. And some of the things that they're interested in looking at is they want to look at how are those regional boundaries that I referenced earlier, how we have 7 different tourism regions, how are those regional boundaries determined? What is the frequency of the distribution of the funds? We currently give the dollars to those regional groups once a year. Here's all your money, you've submitted a plan, that plan's approved, here's your money, go. So they wanted to kind of look at frequency of distributions and how those boundaries are determined. There was a question that came up, the bill moved through because apparently there's some examples where individuals that are homeless aren't asked to pay a local lodging tax. They wondered if there was a way that they could be exempted from the state lodging tax as well. That this work group's going to take a look at that. There were several bills that were brought up during the short session that didn't pass, but kind of got to this issue of what are some of the barriers to expansion to recreation and tourism in Oregon. One of the examples that I can share with you is what I'll call kind of pre-trip or pre-experience liability. When you go to a ski area, you sign a liability waiver. If you go to a guest ranch, you're probably signing a liability waiver before you get on the back of a horse. Before you go on a rafting trip, you're signing a liability waiver. And those liability waivers in Oregon don't have as much weight as they do in other states. Okay? Other states treat liability waivers as a waiver of liability, short of negligence. Please understand, this is not about somebody that's been grossly negligent that has led to harm being done, but that you understand that there's an inherent risk. If I get into a raft that's going to go through a class 4 rapids, I might get thrown out and I might break my arm on that rock. There's an inherent risk in me doing this. We do it with equestrian facilities already. We do it with agritourism, but we don't do it with recreation. And so this was something that legislators were interested in, and so this work group will take a look at it. There's also an interest in sharing information between state and local governments, and this is primarily as it relates to the collection of lodging taxes. There's a great deal of confidentiality, and all of you in the room that are lodging operators appreciate the fact that your information about the lodging tax you're remitted at the city or county level is kept confidential. They don't share that. Because with that information, they'd basically be able to understand how well you're performing. However, there's a question about whether or not there could be a sharing of information between the State Department of Revenue and city government, county government, for efficiency's sake, okay? And so that has been put in for the work group consideration as well, okay? Any questions about the work group portion of House Bill 4146? For those of you that joined us a little bit late, 4146 is a piece of legislation that just passed in the recent short session of the legislature. What the bill didn't do is sometimes just important to talk about. It did not change any of the mandates related to those local tourism funding percentages that I talked about earlier. So all those pieces regarding local lodging taxes, that whatever was being done at the local level prior to July 2nd of 2003 is now the floor. That's grandfathered in. That didn't change. The minimum of 70% for any new taxes or increased taxes didn't change. And the definitions of what is tourism, who is a tourist, and those, what is a tourism-related facility, all those definitions are the same as they were in the bill that was passed back in 2003. Any questions about this? Prior to these town halls, we've gotten out around the state to meet with the regional DMOs and ask them to pull together a group of stakeholders so that we could have some conversations with them about where they're seeing their priorities from a marketing standpoint, from a product development standpoint. And so what had come out is a series of themes that I thought you would just may be interested in seeing. This is a statewide, this isn't a Southern Oregon piece, but this is statewide. And kind of determine if some of these are resonating with you. Effective collaboration with public land and transportation agencies. Any application to Lake County? From folks I've talked to, I would say yes. Visitor wayfinding and signage. In some parts of the state, destinations are concerned about reaching their carrying capacity certain times of the year. In other words, congestion is becoming a problem in some parts of the state. So congestion reduction and alternative transportation options also popped up. Education and training of frontline staff. What are we doing to help those folks that are maybe at that entry level or the front line move up within the industry and to obviously perform at their highest possible level? Ensure that the lodging providers are collecting and remitting the TRT appropriately. This is primarily coming from the lodging operators who are like, we just want to make sure we're doing this right because we know that there are changes that are coming and we want to make sure that we're staying on top of it. A lot of questions about how to better leverage Travel Oregon's programs. The advertising that we're doing, the global sales efforts that I talked about, how do we apply for the grants, how can we become part of the customer service training that you're doing, whatever those programs may be. And the decreasing the seasonality of visitation is obviously related a little bit to the carrying capacity because not every destination feels 100% full 100% of the year. So seasonality is something that if we have opportunities to kind of help spread it out, that's great. It's one of the reasons that you hear us talk a lot about international visitors because a lot of our international visitors are prone to come and travel Oregon other times of the year. The Aussies that I mentioned earlier, our visitors from Australia and New Zealand, are very inclined to want to come to visit Oregon in the wintertime. So it's not unusual at all to have them come and want to experience the state. And our international visitors are obviously ripe for that kind of opportunity to help us with our seasonality challenges as well. We also went out prior to launching these statewide town hall meetings and did this engagement survey. And went up for 2 or 3 weeks that we had the survey out. What was interesting to note is that roughly 57% of the folks that responded are small business folks. And 74% were managers or executives or the owners of those small businesses. We had about 220 respondents, and this map is just to give you kind of an idea by region where the responses came from.
May I make an observation?
Please.
I find it interesting that the majority of the respondents, percentage-wise, come from areas around Portland or the coast, and as you move further out, the percentages drop. Maybe that's an indication of how engaged people feel with regards to this process.
And we wondered about the very same thing, if that could be part, if that's an engagement factor, which is why we're doing 18 town halls and only one is in Portland. And similar, and one is in Corvallis. And then we're moving out, okay? Because it is about making sure that this message is being heard, and we're asking you, when I show you the survey results, does this resonate with you? Does this feel right when we look at this at a regional level? Well, I think some of this could be, if I have 4,000 people in our database, who are those 4,000 folks? And if there are more employees in Oregon's tourism industry in Portland or the Willamette Valley, does that automatically weight that then because they're just more folks? But I had the same question, Bob, about is this also an indication of engagement? And that's why we deliberately and intentionally scheduled our town hall meetings the way that we did. But thank you. One of the first questions we asked were you aware that of the recent legislation? And roughly 94% of the folks that took the survey said yes, we were. 6% were not aware. Of those who were, of the same group of folks, 84% believe that the bill is going to be good for Oregon. 16% weren't convinced that it was or had some concerns. Here's how that breaks down. 84% believe that the tax is good because they saw it, and by the way, the bigger the word, the more people that said it. Okay? That's basically what it means, the infamous word cloud. Okay? 84% believe that the lodging tax is good because it's an economic driver, increases the funding, increases our marketing opportunity, and there's a proven ROI. 16% believe that it's not good. And their primary concerns, as you can see here, were around inequitable distribution. They're concerned about is if it's creating division as well. Any questions about this? I'm going to be sure and stop here because it kind of talks about it being good or not good and why. Okay. So then we went out and started asking folks for their opinions about Travel Oregon. And the bar that you see that's kind of that, what should we call it? Kind of a burnt umber. No, kind of that brownish orange is Southern Oregon. The green is all Oregon. So you can kind of get an idea for how the region that Lake County is in compares to the balance of the state. Fairly close. Travel Oregon, the leading voice for Oregon statewide tourism industry, 4.73. For Southern Oregon, 4.6 roughly for all of Oregon. A little bit of a split here. Travel Oregon provides access to programs that are helpful to me and helpful to my business. Stronger belief here in Southern Oregon than there is statewide. Similarly, the Travel Oregon involves the travel and tourism industry in key decisions that affect it. Again, those are very close, 4.1 to 3.9, very close. So those are overall opinions of Travel Oregon from both a Southern Oregon perspective and an all of Oregon perspective. I'm curious though, does that resonate with you in this room? Those scores feel about right? I can take the silence as acceptance. Trust me, my wife doesn't take my silence as acceptance. She'll prod me until I respond. Then we also went out and asked about how much do you value particular programs that Travel Oregon currently has to offer? And again, Southern Oregon in the orange, Oregon in the green, domestic marketing, and these are ranked in order of, short of other, that's down here, these are ranked in order of how Southern Oregon prioritized them. So domestic marketing was number 1. Niche product development was number 2. Niche product development is when we talk about agritourism, cycling tourism, those kinds of very specific kind of niche tourism opportunities. Destination and product development is more about the rural tourism studios that we do and offer around the state. International marketing and sales was next. The welcome centers and visitor services. Right here, industry research and marketing insight. Again, many of these scored over 4. It's not until you get down here a little bit further to our sustainability programs and, interestingly, the competitive grant program that you see numbers are a little bit lower in terms of Southern Oregon and all of Oregon. How does that feel to you? Do those priorities feel right to you? You don't need to speak on behalf of Lakeview or Lake County. You can say, I, Kate, don't believe those are quite right for me, or I, Bob, do not. You know, but generally, do those feel about right?
Well, I think the hitch is here, we don't have a lot of other destination marketing in our, I'm gonna go ahead and say county. I mean, I could say community because Lakeview is the largest community in our 8,000 square miles, and you know, you've met with the North Lake Chamber folks, you know we have an economic hub on the north end of the county. But the advanced development that Travel Oregon uses for our whole state tourism is really not something that we are familiar with as Lake County residents.
Okay.
Pretty much falls in my corner with a whole lot of other things as well. And so, you know, how we're all apprised of what's going on with the whole tourism aspect in our state is not clearly understood, I think, by the majority of people. And, you know, and I have to take responsibility for that because who else is gonna do it? But there's a whole lot of other things that go on in my world as well. And so I do the best I can. I wish I could do a better job of it, but hopefully within this time of meeting here, those folks that have been able to come forth as stakeholders to try and learn about this can get a better understanding of what Travel Oregon, i.e. in our state government, does for tourism, which is hugely beneficial. And we have so much to offer out here recreationally. We're just trying to struggle forth marketing it. And so this helps, I think, many of us to see what's out there. We just haven't been able to click in and utilize it to its fullest.
Well, I'll be excited to hear, because we're right on the brink of moving into kind of that feedback portion of this, where you'll have an opportunity to kind of collect your thoughts and then share out as comfortable. And I want to make sure that we're able to capture ways that we can still make it more efficient for you. Okay, so I would ask everybody to kind of think about that.
Please.
The last slide I have before we move into that is just, we asked folks also, what would you like to see us do with this new money? With the statewide lodging tax going from 1% to 1.8%, what would you like to see more emphasis put upon? And here in Southern Oregon, 75% of the respondents said niche product development. The next was destination and product development, the regional cooperative tourism program, professional development and training, competitive grants, and then you get into domestic marketing, the welcome center. Now, this doesn't mean they want us to fund us less. Claudia, don't worry. We're keeping the welcome centers, darling. This is about where you'd like to see the additional money go, okay? So with that increase, what would you like to see the emphasis put upon? So, and we called out under other, we wanted to kind of call out what some of those were, and here's some of the things that you see. There are folks here in Southern Oregon that said, you know, maybe more than grants, you ought to think about whether or not you can do loans. That might be authority that Travel Oregon has. We haven't actually explored that. We've typically done grants, not loans, but that was one that came up. Holding a visitor center conference with all the local visitor centers as well as the state welcome centers. They'd like to see that. I know we do that too and have, but maybe there's something different we can do there. And then colleagues on the North Umpqua obviously made some comments about making sure there was good representation from the North Umpqua on the work going forward. So anything there? Any questions on this in terms of the emphasis? How does that feel to you guys? Bob?
Back in June last year, I made a tour of my land of my birth, Wales. Stayed in a number of different hotels. And there was one thing that was common to every hotel, and that was the bathroom. Every bathroom that I stayed in, without exception, had the same tile, the same fittings, and they were all modern. And the only conclusion I came to was that maybe the Welsh Tourism Board had given out loans or grants to every hotel in the place to fix up their bathrooms. So this loans over grants is really appealing.
But only for your bathrooms, Bob.
Yes.
That's all we're going to do with it
And that's, you know, that's another interesting aspect, because those of us that are in small business will now come to the conclusion that since the banking crisis, getting loans for anything from banks is almost impossible. You know, there are all these pseudo banks springing up that will offer you everything under the sun, including their firstborn.
Very true.
But they want 3 of your kids in exchange.
So now what Sarah's passing out is a one-pager where I'd like you to each just take a few minutes working privately. Please do not put your name on this, because at the end, and we don't do handwriting analysis either, but what I'm looking for candid insight on these questions, okay? So any thoughts that you may have on each of these questions would be incredibly beneficial to us. So I would ask that you just take a few minutes, like I said, don't put your name on it, but just capture some of your thoughts. I will, once I've given you a little bit of time to do that, I will ask if anybody would like to share responses to any of the particular questions, and so then maybe we can chat about it a little bit as well.